I can't. I don't have it. My phone's my camera.
It looks like we need a new
Yeah, so
screen.
we are back up and online. So I want to start the second half, I guess, with this, because I find it to be extremely important. Um, the French found a cure. French peer-reviewed study. Our treatment cured 100% of coronavirus patients. On Wednesday, George Ringau, an advisor to the Stanford University School of Medicine, claimed that a world-renowned French researcher had tested a promising cure for coronavirus. He tweeted, "Full peer-reviewed study has been released by Didier Renault, MD, PhD. After 6 days, 100% of patients treated with HCQ plus however you pronounce that medicine were virologically cured." How's that possible? How's that possible that you still have this man preaching the fear doctrine when the French are saying, no, we cured it 100%? It was a case study of 40 patients, so I'm not taking it 100% face value. But then it kind of gets weird when you look at these other articles that are coming out, like in Italy, where you have, as I pull this up here, 99% of those who died from the virus had other illnesses, says Italy. We're tracking the latest coronavirus outbreak in the global response. More than 99% of Italians' coronavirus fatalities were people who suffered from previous medical conditions, according to a study at the country's National Health Service. After deaths from virus reached more than 2,500, which is a 150% increase in the past week, health authorities began combing through data to provide clues to help combat the spread of the disease. Prime Minister government is evaluating whether the extended nationwide lockdown began the beginning of April. The Italians have confirmed more than 31,500 cases of the illness. And this is a little graph that shows you. 0.8% of fatalities had no other illnesses. 25% of fatalities had one other illness. 25% of fatalities had two other illnesses. And 48.5% of fatalities had three other illnesses. Where is this in the national news? Where is this the people that need to stay home? Why are they saying if you're someone over the age of 65 that has two or more pre-existing medical conditions, stay home. You don't need to go in public. You need to self-isolate and stay away from your family. That's not the response. That's not what they're aiming for. This is pure social conditioning. It is a literal lie what that man is saying on that television, because that press conference came out after that French news article did. So the fact that they're literally still lying to people while restricting access to information, while locking people into their homes and not being honest about the global statistics it's just mind-boggling that half of the people in Italy that have passed away from this, like God bless them and I'm sorry for them and their families, had three pre-existing illnesses. A quarter of them had two, and a quarter of them had one. And 0.8%, less than 1%, an almost statistically irrelevant percent, had no illnesses at all. But you don't hear anyone talking about that. This is just rah-rah patriotism. We're going to war with an invisible enemy. Stay in your house because we're all going to die. And it's crazy. And it's literally just to drive fear, to create this global narrative shift of, well, we all had to be locked in our houses because little Susie was at risk of killing her grandma. When they don't tell you if grandma has no other pre-existing conditions, statistically, she's going to be perfectly fine.
Yeah, and this also too inherently, and again, this may be looking at it a little bit too closely again, but this whole virus inherently has people turning against each other, because essentially you're afraid of your neighbor. You're afraid of the person that's next to you, essentially, if you're really afraid of this virus and afraid of catching it. So I also see it too as a way of keeping people further divided in a sense. And I think that's sort of a frightening thing. And I think it's important too, Andrew, you bring up these statistics with the healthcare. Like, yeah, we understand that this is a real virus and people are being harmed because of it. But it's very clear that the actual threat isn't being, there's only half truths being presented to us. So, Steve, any thoughts on that article that Andrew was just reading from?
Yeah, sorry, I was just tweeting out the new link on the A for A stream. I don't even know. I don't even know if it's real. I don't know what we have to compare it to. I don't know. I know one person right now in France who is still on like some serious self-isolation, and I haven't talked to her today. If that's the case, if this is true, if there's a 100% successful treatment and it's not being rolled out globally, something is really fucking wrong. Caitlin Johnstone had a fantastic tweet today that I'm gonna try and find here real quick. Here we go. Yeah, she says, FYI, if your government is pushing the suspension of civil liberties before coming up with a healthcare plan or providing you with financial security in an unprecedented economic crisis, then their desire to suspend civil liberties has nothing to do with fighting the pandemic. If this, I don't want to say cure, but I guess it is. If there's a cure that exists in France and we're not hearing about it on US television, we don't have our Canadian friends or our German friends or our UK friends that are tweeting out, where the fuck is this thing? Why don't we have this thing? If it's legit, it needs to be made available. But the catch is, we don't have governments that necessarily want this to end yet. They haven't been able to just blanket remove our civil liberties through legislation. Those emergency powers to the DOJ haven't been granted yet. We should get to that next too. I'll get that ready to go. So it's not in the best interest of the people who actually rule this country, actually rule the UK, actually rule Australia, because Australia has that no more than 2 people rule now too. And New Zealand. It's not worth it to the Five Eyes countries to solve this problem too quickly. You know what I mean?
And it's incredibly sad that factual information at this point has to come from a YouTube show that's being done in 3 different people's houses. Like, it's insane that the governments, whether it's the government in your state, whether it's your federal government, literally just aren't giving you accurate information. Like, beyond anything else, the fact that these tyrants are deciding no more than 2 people can gather at a time. For what? Like, I get that there's a crisis, but if you're not also providing the information that says no more than 2 people with 3 or more pre-existing medical conditions should be gathering at a time, that's the more important statistic, because that lets you say, hey, Grandpa, make sure you're okay. Because there's other things that people are dying from while having the coronavirus because of the way that it affects your immune system that no one's talking about. So the simple fact that governments around the world are locking hands with the intelligence communities, running down the hall, and then putting on a show about Trump's going to the left as Nancy Pelosi blocks it, they're on the same team. Neither of them want to fucking bail out the American people. You hear the conversation all the time on the House floor now, and Senate floor, where they say, well, in 2008, it was the company's fault. We had to bail them out. But this time is different. This time we have to give them trillions of dollars because it's not their fault. No, we live in a capitalist system from everything that we're told, right? Like, that's the paradigm that they have built around us, is you either live or you die. And now at this point, now that there's a crisis, now that they've done trillions of dollars in stock buybacks, now that they've fucked their workers for the last 40 years, stripping away legislation designed to protect people and give them basic decency, we're going to bail out an airline after they've spent billions of dollars buying their own stocks from the tax break that they got 2 years ago? Like, no, let them go under. We can find a new way. It's not like those airplanes are going to go anywhere. It'll just be restructured in a system that isn't designed solely for the profit of the tyrannical global elite.
That's a great point, because the ability for an airplane to stay in flight and be piloted doesn't rely on whether or not the CEO gets paid. It relies on whether or not there's a pilot and a crew in order to operate the machinery.
And even Ted Cruz, real quick, on the House floor, compared to a mom-and-pop pizza shop in Houston to a multinational, multi-billion-dollar airline company that has handled its money improperly. I want that mom-and-pop pizza shop to get bailed out. I want these small businesses to make sure that they understand what's going on and get taken care of. But at the same time, these multinational global players, they don't need our help. They've built their empire off of the backs of our labor, off of the money that we have earned under a system where money means nothing. So the simple fact that they're trying to now ask for more, while at the same time exacerbating the minimalization of resources and hoarding the money and power all to themselves at the top, is just crazy.
Steve, you want to finish your thought?
It brings me back to the point I made earlier, that it's getting harder and harder to deny that this isn't a man-made virus, that this isn't something that happened to be the excuse that global elite are using to push this. If you guys have been watching the content that Jason Burmis has been putting out, which, by the way, if you're not, you should. Phenomenal. He's been doing incredible work on this since January 23rd, or right around that time. And so is Slow News Day. I had Craig Pasta Jardula on my show. That was yesterday. Seems like it was a week ago. But when I was messaging him with the link, I had realized that the last time that he was on the show was right after Zero Hedge got kicked off of Twitter for their reporting on the coronavirus. And that was right around the time that both Jason started doing his excellent coverage, and people started to slowly become aware of what was going on. But I still contend, as does the Chinese government and a number of other people in a number of other countries, that this particular strain of coronavirus has been around since September or October of last year. I contend that I had it, that my family had it. It was an upper respiratory thing where we felt like fucking death warmed over for 2 or 3 weeks, and then it went away. So to have a situation where, where martial law is on the table, where the first story we heard about Trump was that he was trying to obtain exclusive rights to a vaccine that was being developed in Germany. What the fuck happened to that vaccine, by the way? Not that I am going to line up for a fucking shot, but if there are people that are dying, maybe they should get some treatment. My fear is that they're going to basically starve us out, keep us afraid, and have us so fucking just Stockholm syndromed out that when they come to us and say, we found a vaccine and it's mandatory, that the vast majority of people will be like, put that shot in my arm, put it in my arm, and not think, what the fuck is in this vaccine? Why is it mandatory? And why do I need it in my body?
And that's when the term asymptomatic carrier becomes terrorist. That's where they can say, oh, he was arrested because he was an asymptomatic carrier that refused vaccination. That's insane. And to as much credit and or dismay as they may get, the anti-vax community within our country and within the global community, as terrible as they have been, just for the arguments that they make in regards to everything, have honestly done a good job putting the idea in people's heads that, like, don't accept the government drugs. Like, don't expect a cure to come from these people. Because to be extremely specific, a vaccine is not a cure. A vaccine is heavy metals with a living or dead version. In the case of a virus, they're neither, injected into your body. So their solution to having people get infected with coronavirus is to infect them with coronavirus and hope that your body's response systems can happen fast enough to stop it. What happens when they inject that vaccine into somebody that has 3 or more pre-existing conditions? What's the mortality rate of someone with 3 or more pre-existing conditions? This information is not being shared with us. We're not getting this statistically relevant data to make decisions as an informed public, because they don't want the public to be informed. They want the public to be scared, helpless, and waiting for a government response.
Oh, absolutely. And we see this bear out just with our friends that we talk to, on Signal that are over in the UK. Like, there was a chat there was a text that I saw earlier today that was like, oh no, there's people here, the general consensus is that the government isn't doing enough. The government isn't moving fast enough. The government hasn't taken good enough control of this situation. And the kind of brainwashing that it takes to demand that your government roll out martial law faster, strip away civil liberties faster, whatever it takes, just make the scary thing go away.
Right. And that's because they're not giving real information.
Into a global war on terror. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an information war.
We desperately need honest actors in this situation.
Yeah, like, what would WikiLeaks be saying right now in regards to this? Like, what information, if they had access to distribute it amongst the public, would it say about the coronavirus? What manufacturing plant was it originally made in? What level 4 security facility around the world was it built in? Because there's people that have been arrested in China for biological weapon espionage, smuggling literal coronaviruses from Canadian level 4 bioweapons labs to the Wuhan Institute of Bioweapons Development, which is another level 4 facility in China. So the basic fact that they don't even talk about what this is, where it came from, the statistically relevant information about illness, the statistically relevant information about cure rates, the statistically relevant information about death rates is crazy to me. And this is something that I talked about in the group chat. The hot spots to watch right now aren't necessarily New York. That's the staging ground for military rollout. The places to watch are Illinois, Arizona, and Florida, because those are the places where they took a bunch of old people, packed them into voting booths together at the behest of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, as Jimmy Dore has rightfully pointed out in his videos, in the middle of a pandemic. A lot of those older people are at the most at-risk age group, right? How many of those people have 1, 2, or 3 pre-existing conditions, if not more? So it really comes down to, they're trying to create fear, they're trying to cause death, and they're trying to cause panic, while they already know what groups this affects the most, and that is people over the age of 65 with pre-existing medical conditions.
You're right, Andrew. And just to be clear, too, I've seen this sort of shift. Also, now they're starting to say that it's like our generation, millennial generation, that's being disproportionately impacted by this. What is your response to that?
So I believe in New York, this is something that Burmis has reported on. There was a younger person, I don't know the exact age, but I think they were somewhere around 40, that had an underlying leukemia condition that died from coronavirus. Did they die because the coronavirus attacks their immune system and no one is sharing the information that coronavirus attacks your immune system? And if you have a pre-existing immune disorder, you should self-isolate, and making that the story that they're talking about instead of everyone needs to stay home because everyone's going to die, our hospitals are going to be overrun. The reason they're going to be overrun is because accurate information wasn't shared in the first place about this. The reason they're going to be overrun is because people don't honestly know the truth about what is happening, the symptoms, as well as the conditions that this virus will kill you under. But the thing I want to tell people the most is the James Corbett perspective. Look outside. Like, go look out. Like, go on that. If you're in the UK, take a walk. Like, right now, before they lock you down, and just see what your world looks like. Because if you do not find a way to bring people together and stop this from happening, it's never going to look the same again. And it's never going to have to, because you're never going to be allowed to go outside and see it. Because this fear of the coronavirus is not going to go away. It's going to be brought up time and time again, just like 9/11 is in the United States. And it's something that people don't realize.
They're already framing it like that. It's already being framed like a 9/11. It's already every time you hear de Blasio or Trump or Gavin Hansom or fucking anybody talk about this, it's all framed as we're fighting a war. We're in a war. They allude to World War II. They allude to 9/11. Burmis is right when he says it's 1929 and the stock market crash plus 1984 by George Orwell plus 9/11. That's what this is. This is a engineered transfer of the remaining wealth and power to the top 0.1%.
And in its
That's what
and in its time, the solutions will be praised. The rollouts of a universal basic income, the rollout of federally mandated resource distribution, the rollout of federally controlled manufacturing. But if we have the chance to have videos and information shared like this 20 years from now, God, I hope so, what are we going to be arguing for? Like, what are we going to be trying to say we need back instead of trying to have defended 20 years before that, like our right to privacy, like our right to access free and open information? So it's the response that scares me, but it's also what comes next, because that's the biggest thing, is the solutions that they're going to offer at the time will feel incredible, right? You're going to be like, oh, I just got a $1,200 check from Trump, right? But then when you have to get that $1,200 check every month, but the cost of bread's $15, and you don't have a job unless you work in a government-run factory, so you're not going to be able to eat unless you're doing what the government wants you to do. You're not going to be able to leave your house unless you have your papers that say, hey, I'm going to work now, sir. Like, what kind of world is that? What kind of world are we allowing to be created when people are begging for the complete centralization of resource distribution?
Andrew, great points you bring up. And as we talk about the seriousness that's to come of this so-called crisis, something that you and I have talked about before, even like last summer, we were talking about the decline of the U.S. empire and how an empire will go to great lengths to try to sustain itself and try to assert its power. I think you and I both talked about, I remember we were sitting literally like in an Uber talking about this, how we felt that in our lifetimes we would be feeling and seeing the effects of the decline of the U.S. empire to a greater extent than we already were. To me, this seems very much a part of that. Would you agree?
Yeah, this is in my opinion, the final death throes of the Republic. It started, at least in the United States, and I believe it was 1974, where our currency was removed from the gold standard. There's a legitimate argument to be made that it happened in 1917 and 18 when we received a central banking institution and citizens lost complete control over the distribution of wealth and the creation of it within the country. But the petrodollar can't support itself anymore, and that's literally what we're witnessing. If you watch Ron Paul's channel, and I'm no economist by any extent of the imagination, but he points out for the last 4 years how I can't tell you when it's going to collapse, but our markets are going to collapse. This entire process is completely unsustainable. The fact that governments just are throwing $2.2 trillion into a crashing market and can't prop it up. Yes, Steve?
It's over $5 trillion since they started putting billions into Federal Reserve banks starting back in October. $5 trillion. $2.2 trillion in a 48-hour period.
And just so people can know what happened back in October of this year, because this is something we're not hearing talked about in our independent media. I'm just going to scroll through a quick Twitter feed real fast, just so people can see this. There was this thing called Event 201. We touched on it briefly, but in this top search bar here, hit this into Twitter and I'll show you how. Go to advanced search, all keywords, hashtag Event 201. Scroll all the way down, pick your month, October, start date 1 year 2019. End month, October, start or end date, go all the way to the 31st, 2019. Hit search. What you're going to see is a pandemic simulation of a global coronavirus. And this was held by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, United Nations representatives. And it gets so disgusting that these unelected global bureaucrats passed out coronavirus plushies, right? Coronavirus plushies to the people that attended. These people think that they are unaccountable. They think that they can do what they want, when they want, to who they want, for any reason. And it's just simply insane. Like this right here, this is literally the game plan for social media censorship, and censoring our communications. And this right here is less direct government intervention, and this right here is more direct government intervention. And at no point do they talk about literally just allowing people the right to communicate freely. So again, this was Event 201. They have a website. They have a YouTube channel. This was all live streamed. And again, Jason Burmis has gone through 2 of the 3 or 4 events that happened that day, because they held multiple panel discussions. So I would just like everyone watching just to scroll through this and share it with whoever your favorite content creator is, because the fact that they held a global simulation with unelected bureaucrats from the World Health Organization, from the CDC in the United States, the Chinese CDC, they had someone, I believe it was from NBC, they had a representative from FedEx there, to talk about global supply chains. They had someone there from the National Plane Systems, like the big airplane people that were there. And who would register to win their coronavirus plushie? Like, you could, I think entry might be closed, but you had the chance to take one home with you if you registered online and weren't able to attend the event. Like, the simple fact that they're allowed to have these institutions that exist solely for the ability for them to self-actualize global control of resource distribution is insane. Because at no point is there any discussion of civil liberty. At no point is there any discussion about perpetrating factual, accurate information to people. It's literally pre-made propaganda pieces pushed out by the World Health Organization and this university, describing what our media is saying to us today about these diseases. And so it's just like, it's mind-blowing, I guess.
Fun fact, the first week of August of 2019, Fort Detrick, the premier level 4 bioweapons facility in the US, was shut down by the CDC. Now, the CDC doesn't shut down a bioweapons lab for no reason. One of those reasons is somebody spilled a jar and whoops, holy fuck, we're all going to die. Another one of those reasons is something's missing. Inventory is off, and we have to shut down this entire facility until we figure out what happened to it. One of the theories about this being a man-made virus, which again, in my opinion, it's getting harder and harder and harder to deny that, is that it was US made, and it went to China because the Chinese went and got it and took it and brought it back. There's another theory that says it was used against the Chinese, and that what we're seeing in the West is retaliatory. I'm not here to tell you what to think. There's a fair amount of information out about on both. I draw your own conclusions every single time. It is just, it's one hell of a coincidence that a month after Fort Detrick gets closed, a simulated exercise about a coronavirus is held, and then 44 days later, we find out that this thing is actually in the United States, and less than 44 days after that, half of the entire world is on lockdown. And the scenario is playing out reasonably close to the way that it does the solutions that they're coming up with and the problems that they're addressing in these roundtables and these panels at Event 201. I've seen in my chat a couple of times the phrase "plandemic." I mean, it's clever because it's probably true.
It also seems like the time in all of this is pretty interesting as well. I mean, we were on the verge of a war with Iran a few months ago, and it seems that there were some escalating tensions with Iraq like a week or two ago that wasn't very heavily reported on, of course, because of the coronavirus. So it really seems that this is a great opportunity for those who are in power, who are threatened by the common person, to really prevent people from getting together, from assembling and protesting as well, being the fact that in some countries around this world, two people cannot even be in close quarters of one another. What do you make of the timing in all of this, Andrew and Steve?
So I don't think it's a coincidence. And I don't want to blame it on any one particular thing, because there's crises around the world right now. But you literally have the trial of the millennia, the thing that will determine the fate of humans' ability to access truthful information about their governments, happening at the same time that governments are lying to their population while taking away their right to peacefully assemble, or their right to assemble at all for any reason. Which actually, I want to give a shout out to the concept of decentralized activism. Because what we've been saying here from the very beginning is it takes one person to be a protest. It doesn't take 10,000 people in the streets. You can be the one person that goes around to all your neighbors putting flyers on inside their door, not inside, but like stuck in the crack of their door, telling them factual information about what's happening to Julian Assange right now. And it doesn't take two people to do that. It doesn't take two people from the same household to go walk around and put posters up in town. And if you tell people, well, you know, police officer, this is just how I get my exercise. Like, I have the right to leave my house once a day right now. When I choose to leave, I want to make sure I can get my arm workout in, staple in this sign. I mean, it's just insane. But do what you can with the time, money, and resources that you have. If you're someone that feels that they can only participate in social media, do that and do it the best that you possibly can. Get a group of people working with you to amplify tweets and hashtags and take hashtags over. But if you're someone that has a group of friends that you know that they also care about these same issues that you do, send one friend out one direction, you go the other direction. You have two people participating in a street protest. And Taylor and I did it all last summer. You can get about 200 telephone poles with signs on them in about an hour. And that's literally just a trip around a city block, essentially. So just do the very basics for what you can, because the war here isn't against an invisible enemy called the coronavirus. The battle is for us to use information and association, or lack thereof, as a means to distribute information. Because we can't win with an armed revolution at this point. Like, there's no way that we can storm the United Nations and pull these people out and hold them accountable. But what we can do is inform the people around us about Event 201. We can inform them about Julian's trial. And that's really what it comes down to, is China got hit 2 months later, Julian's on trial. 2 months after that, we're all locked in our fucking house. So I know there's a lot of people that think it may be a stretch to try to compare the two. But really, it's the tweet that goes around that says they don't want to do this to Julian Assange. He's just stopping them from doing it to you. And that's really the most accurate statement, because at this point, they are putting the world in solitary confinement. And if you do not comply, you will be strip searched, you will be handcuffed, and you will be thrown into a solitary cell.
No, I'm not being it awesome. You're right. And look, now is basically the perfect time for people who are so inclined and know the risks to go do banner drops. Now is the perfect time to, if you know the risks and are so inclined, to sidewalk chalk the middle of the busiest and most exposed streets in your town. Like, we've got to be able to turn this dog shit into at least chicken cacciatore, if not veal parmigiano. We can't succumb to global tyranny. We can't let unelected pimps, pedophiles, and sociopathic bagmen dictate the course of our day-to-day existence. While we can, get out and get something seen. While we can, let's communicate on as many platforms as possible, that no matter what we get taken away from us through the course of this, we don't get our sense of community taken from us. Jimmy Dore says all the time, Donald Trump didn't steal his critical thinking. Don't let Donald Trump steal your sense of community. Don't let Nancy Pelosi steal your sense of community. Don't let Boris Johnson do it. We're going to have to get creative, but we're going to find ways.
And so something that I'm trying to do locally, because we have 2 articles left. One of them is a feel-good story. One of the things I'm trying to do locally is to encourage municipalities to find a way to start farming. I'm just literally calling it the Municipal Farming Project. Today I probably called about somewhere in the vicinity of 100 or so city council members, mayor's assistants, city managers, administrators for the city, clerks of council, and said, hey, did you guys have a chance to read the proposal that I sent over? I'm really concerned about global supply chain disruptions. If you look at what's happening around the world right now, we're running into this precipice of our on-demand food distribution system, which is when you purchase something, when you purchase a food product from a restaurant or a store, it gets replaced by a recently manufactured project. The manufacturing got shut down. So what are you doing as a city to produce the resources necessary to fend off starvation and to also lessen the burden on state and federal responses? So that way our community doesn't become the center of the problem where we can help provide people with additional solutions. And every city council person, short of one, was at least willing to listen. I got in contact with multiple clerks of council that distributed my proposal a second time to the council members themselves. And it's really easy. Like literally all it is, I'll put the proposal up somewhere eventually, because I want to make sure people have access to it to get it out in their own communities. But it's just asking your city to use its pre-existing resources to make sure that people can eat. And some questions that you get in response will be, well, what about social isolation? And I'm like, well, physical distancing can still happen, because if you have 5 or 6 people in a quarter-acre field, they're still going to be about 100 feet apart. So there's no risk of cross-contamination there, on top of the fact that they'll be using gloves during this time. So if they do handle a tool that wasn't sanitized properly, it's not coming in direct contact with their skin, and no one's touching their face with a glove that they were just using to dig around in the dirt with. And most of them are like, okay, that sounds like a really interesting thing. And then the other questions I got, because we have shelter-in-place orders, was, well, how are people even going to be able to go out and do this? And I say, well, your Parks and Recreation Department will be able to still do this because they're a necessary city function. So you can have people be volunteer members or paid members, depending on what your city wants to do, of the Parks and Recs Department, and deputize them or give them papers to help get them out of the house. Because that's the future that we're entering, is your papers, please, where you're not going to be able to travel. Like in California, they're dropping drones on people, right? But if your city is willing to deputize everyone in the community as a Parks and Rec member, so that way, when they so choose, they can go out and work in the public field, it's not the best solution. It still sounds like fucking slavery to me. But at the end of the day, at least you're not relying on a federally distributed food resource where you have to work in a government factory to have money to purchase something that's not your box of rations. So get creative. Even if the municipal farm thing sounds fucking ridiculous to you, find a way to get community happening around the systems and the responses that they're pushing out. Because ultimately, if we can get cities to act proportionally, we can mitigate the calls for federal aid. We can mitigate the calls for state aid. So that way, they can focus on the sick people, and they don't have to distribute food to your city.
100%. Real quick, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Rob Juno for the super chat. You rock, brother. I really appreciate that. And you, that's called Cuba. That's funny. Your municipal farming proposal, Andrew, it's called Cuba. It is. That's fucking hilarious. Look, man. Well, if you've ever watched Slow News Day, you have heard me say that the reason I have this show, if I can do anything, if I can get any point across, it's that it's incumbent on us to make our communities sustainable so that we can rely less on federal government, on state government. It is imperative that while we are on, more or less house arrest, that we find ways, even digitally, to reach out to our community to plan these kinds of things. Because, look, they are going to make people go back to work. They can't just tank the entire economy. What becomes a necessary business, that list is going to increase, but it's going to increase, at least if they get their way, through National Socialism, through the kind of economic fascism that we saw in Germany in the 30s and the early 40s. That's how that's going to happen. Andrew said it. You're going to go to a government facility to produce XYZ. What we need to do is find out who gets the travel permits, who gets to work, and work with them and communicate with them to make sure that somebody's watering the garden, to make sure that somebody is, dead leafing, to make sure that somebody is mixing nutrients and all that kind of stuff. Like, this can be done. We have an opportunity to, no matter what happens, the world that emerges when this crisis is over is going to be a vastly different world. And we have the opportunity right now to make it so that it is a vastly more sustainable world for us, for our kids. If enough of us are able to talk to the people that live around us and hopefully explain to them or walk them through exactly what has happened.
And the other hard part in getting information out to people is that they're scared to hear it, that they fundamentally understand that something is wrong outside of the virus. But then when you share information with them about it, they retreat, they retaliate and say, like, I'm already stressed out. The TV has me going nuts. I just want the federal government to step in, take my rights away, give me a factory job, give me the food, and I'll take your pill. Right? That's what people are so stressed out and conditioned to respond to, that it's our job to say, like, hey, my friend, like, I appreciate you. Let's go eat some fresh fruits and vegetables that we got from our community farm. And develop, because what we're facing right now isn't just the centralization of resources. It is the centralization of power. And I don't mean like the power coming to my light. I mean like the power to make decisions in your life. Because once they have you closed in this little box that you think is your house until the government tells you it's not, is the core thing that's going to also allow us to fight back. If we can reduce power in any way, shape, or form from centralized state, federal, and global authority down to the municipal level, we need to find ways to sell that to our cities, to build these things and to build these systems and to reclaim power. Because ultimately, it is the individual that should be governing themselves, and municipalities are the manifestation of collective self-governance, and anything above that should be simply administrative at best. Where we're seeing now, if you watch Event 21, the discussion of global distribution of resources, not even federal, right? And that's something that most people can't even comprehend right now. But when the United Nations rolls in on a white horse and says, hey, we forced the slaves in China to make you all these masks, here you go, here's all the food that we forced the slaves in Abu Dhabi to make, here you go, people will praise the United Nations. They will praise these global centralized power hubs, and it might be good for 10 years, because that's the trick, right? Is they give you prosperity. They give you prosperity for a short period of time until they're ready to take it away. Like, if you even look at the propaganda from the Trump campaign, or the Trump presidency, the campaign that never ended, we're the greatest economy ever. We have the greatest jobs numbers ever. We're the greatest. And then all of a sudden, the floor gets pulled out. Everyone loses their jobs. And the only thing that out of this entire situation I can say that I am thankful for, that more independent media on the left and right need to be talking about, is the fact that they created our general strike. They did the thing that organizers around the world have been trying to do, which is get people out of these factories and out of these jobs and crash the economy. But now it is our responsibility to get people to demand things that aren't authoritarian measures, right? Like, there's this whole big, like, when are we going to get Medicare for all? We're going to get it. But no one now is having the conversation of when are we going to give the nurses direct control of the administration of healthcare and collect the money for it at a municipal level. That conversation doesn't happen, because that conversation directly removes power from the federal government and centralized authority. So even a Medicare for all system where everyone's covered, you have ways of building that outside of providing the war criminals what your healthcare is going to be. So find creative solutions and find answers to problems that most people don't see coming.
Yeah, because where we're at right now, there are people who knowingly, willingly facilitate war crimes just for the health insurance. I talked to them, and I framed it that way. And they're like, yeah, I guess so. What am I going to do? I mean, there's a Lockheed facility right here. A lot of the people that program there live in this town. They know what the fuck they're doing. And when you get them, you know, catch them late enough at night when they've had a few, maybe you burn a bowl with them, what they start to talk about is fucking horrifying. Like, look, right now at this moment, I'm going to pull this article up because I've been wanting to get to it. We know from the 2012 NDAA that habeas corpus can be repealed if it falls under the umbrella of terrorism. Now, we talked about this at the top of the show. The DOJ is using COVID-19 crisis to push for expansive emergency powers. Where is it? The proposal would grant those top judges broad authority to pause court proceedings during emergencies. It would, and this is a route that the UK can go, by the way, too. Like, it's going to go one way or the other. They're going to release some prisoners, or they're going to do this. It would apply to any statutes or rules of procedure otherwise affecting pre-arrest, post-arrest, pre-trial, trial, and post-trial procedures in criminal and juvenile proceedings and all civil processes and proceedings. What the hell? According to draft legislative language, Department shared with Congress in making the case for the change. The DOJ document wrote that individual judges can currently pause proceedings during emergencies, but that their proposal would make sure all judges in any particular district could handle emergencies in a consistent manner. What does that mean? What do you think that means, Andrew, Taylor? What do you think the consistent manner means? Because they say you could be arrested and never brought before a judge until they decide that the emergency or the civil disobedience is over. Annie Juan? Taylor? Am I just... Like,
So no, I'm on. I was just searching for the this call here. I have so many browsers up. Yeah, I mean it's absolutely remarkable, this sort of steps that are being taken here to yeah, just the steps that are being taken here. I'm sorry, I was kind of zoning out those past few minutes. Because I wanted to address something else, but I'll bring that up at the end of the show here. But yeah, it's really interesting, Andrew. If you want to weigh in here on what Steve was just talking about in this article,
really,
go
my
ahead.
only question for people to ask themselves is, what the hell does suspension of habeas corpus have to do with the coronavirus? Like, what are they planning that they need to suspend your right to just a trial in general? And that's really just the biggest thing, is why do they need this power, and why is it happening before a well thought out strategic plan to help the people impacted and not the corporations, multinational corporations? And will we see this come into effect before the aid package? Is this the bargaining chip that's on the table? Like, hey, Trump, if you want to give everyone $1,200, you have to let us drag whoever the fuck we want to jail. Like, is that the negotiating tool that's going on in the background here? Like,
yeah, it's got
Right. I want to bring.
It's got to be. Go ahead, T.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry, Steve. I was not paying too much attention to that article when you were speaking. But one thing I did want to bring up here that I do want to, talk about, that I feel is often not discussed, is the fact that the U.S. obviously has sanctions on Iran and Venezuela. This is greatly harming the people in those countries who are not well with the coronavirus or who are just unwell in general. This is harming them to a great extent. It's really, really important that the U.S. lift these sanctions. I do not agree with the sanctions to begin with, but especially during this crisis in this pandemic, the fact that this is continuing on is really, really sinister. And we're seeing socialist governments like China and Cuba and others that are stepping up to the aid of countries like Italy and others, really showing up to help Italy in this time when the U.S. has really not stepped up in that case. And also this goes back to sort of the conversation we were having about the vaccines. They're really, or not just the vaccines, but also the medications to help with this virus here. It really seems and it is very apparent that there is clearly a motive to prevent China from being the first to find a cure for this virus or find a vaccine for this virus, because there's a potential loss of money there. The U.S. could make quite a bit if they were to be the first to come up with this cure or a vaccine for this illness. And that was just something I was really focused on earlier that I wanted to address here, a little bit off topic from what we were talking about. But
I think that the cure or the vaccine that they're going to push already exists, right? Because if you're in a bioweapons facility, one of the first things you do when you make these viruses is you make the cures to them. And not to harken back to a movie or anything, but we have been predisposed to actually trying to, at least in some way, figure out what is happening around us through literature, through film. And I'm not saying that movies are like the be-all, end-all, that people wrote prophecy through movie scripts or anything. But it's a very simple thing to understand that the weaponization of viruses comes along with the vaccines for them. So they push this thing out there across the world. They grow this sense of horrifying fear inside of everybody, begging for a response. And then the white knight rides in that already has the vaccine, not the cure, the vaccine, which is literally just injecting yourself with the virus in some way, shape, or form and hoping your immune system catches it first. And then we'll pay trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars to that company with the patent while it's produced and distributed to 6 billion people across the planet. And I think that that's something that's really important to drive home, is when the companies that make these vaccines start rolling them out, they're not doing it out of charity. They're doing it because they're making some fucking money in the background. And it's something that you won't even hear talked about. It'll be the only noise that it'll make is the sound of a pen clicking after they finish signing the bill that distributes trillions of dollars to these big pharmaceutical companies, when the French have already said, hey, we have these pre-existing drugs that are produced around the world that already exist in the supply chain that we can ramp up to manufacturing of, that have a 100% success rate, at least in a peer-reviewed case study of 40 patients, that after 6 days, they're cured. Not in remission, not recovering, but cured. And again, this was 40 people tested by one doctor, but it was peer-reviewed. So I'm not saying that this will solve every case of the coronavirus around the world, but it gives a very basic starting point for how we actually solve this problem instead of locking ourselves into houses, waiting for the bread lines, waiting for the government jobs to get the government food. So I just want that to sink into people, that the people that are creating these problems, the Event 201 holders, already have their solutions in mind. They already simulated in their little tabletop role play, okay, we'll probably get this vaccine out in about 18 months. So that's really what we're going to see, because Western society has been impacted at this point for, I would say, about a month. Truly impacted with a true spread, with a true death count for about a month. And we already have something that we can consider a cure, not a treatment, not a recovery process, not a vaccine, but we're not hearing about it. And even if it doesn't solve every case because of people's pre-existing medical conditions, the majority of us will be saved by this, like the vast majority. And if we even get sick and end up in the hospital at all. So that's just realize that every press conference you hear from every government official that tells you we're looking for a vaccine or we're trying to find a cure is lying to you, to your face, to your family, to your terrified grandmother living in a nursing home. It's a lie. There is a treatment out there that cures this in a peer-reviewed case study. Again, only 40 people. We don't know exactly what pre-existing conditions, if any, those people had. But the solution is out there, and it's not lock yourself indoors, don't talk to your friends, and tell them to stay the fuck away from you.
Absolutely. I think we're going to wind this down, but before we do, and before we give our final thoughts and our goodbyes, there is something that I meant to discuss this on my live stream earlier, and I guess I completely flaked on it. Let's pull it up. But this happened. I guess one of our chief swine, Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, now was Secretary of Defense, isn't he?
Secretary of State.
That's right. Secretary of Defense is the Raytheon lobbyist.
Formerly John Bolton.
Yeah, that was National Security Advisor.
That's right.
At any rate, Mike Pompeo, the fat fuck that sat there on camera and said when he was in the CIA, we lied, we cheated, we stole, we had whole manuals on it. That guy was in Italy. What he was doing in Italy, I'm not 100% sure, but
negotiating the Italians out of one silk, one road, or
right.
one China, one road.
This happened. During the welcoming ceremony, a female reporter gifted Pompeo a bag of dog food and advised him to dine 3 times a day so he could acquire a dog's honesty and credibility. I'm going to go ahead and full screen this right here.
The audio's not good on it.
Yeah, I know. It's not the point.
No, I meant on the video.
Watch her, watch her get fucking just zoomed out of there too. That is, that's just downright beautiful. You need to eat the dog food 3 times a day so that you can acquire how did she phrase it again? That's just gorgeous. Acquire the dog's honesty and credibility. Oh, bless her. That's just beautiful. It is. If you find yourself in a room with Mike Pompeo, if you know that Mike Pompeo is going to be in a room, and you're not afraid of getting arrested for civil disobedience, like this is something we can talk to Code Pink about. You know, like, hey, next time you're in a room with Mike Pompeo, make sure you bring a bag of dog food. Like, dog food for Mike should be a new hashtag on Twitter. Like, I would love to see that going. Dog food for Mike. I had to get that out of my system. I meant to talk about it. It was one of the first things I saw this morning. It just made my heart sing. And yeah, so I don't know, man. What do y'all think about that?
I'm damn proud, I guess, is the way that I would put it. Like, not even that it was me that gave that man a bag of dog food and slid in the best insult of like, hey, if you eat this, you might almost be as good as a fucking dog. right?
You might have the credibility of an animal that eats its own turds.
Right. That's something that I won't allow to lick my face because it eats directly out of the litter box whenever it gets the chance, right? So I'm just like, I love people like that. Medea Benjamin, big shout out to her. She's one of the reasons that I got involved in activism, in like actual organizing and activism beyond like political theater, is because she went on stage with Elliot Abrams and was like, this man's a war criminal. This man sold guns to the Iran-Contra people. This man caused a genocide. And she's this little, like, fucking 5'1" maybe, beautiful soul of a human being. And I'm like, man, if that little old lady, no offense if Medea's watching, if that little old lady can get dragged off a stage, like, what the hell is 6 foot tall, bearded Andrew Smith doing? Right? So I would encourage everybody to just do the very best to do whatever the fuck you can at this point. Because even if you don't realize it, the whole world was going through a revolution before this happened. Like, we're the last country that it's arriving at, but tons of nations across the globe, Eastern, Western, South American, African, doesn't matter. Like, they were rising up against their governments, demanding accountability, demanding representation, and then global pandemic that was simulated in October 2019. And the Yellow Vests aren't stopping. Just in case anyone's interested, France has had almost as much of a draconian step as the UK has, which no one talks about. And they were still out there in force for the 70th weekend in a row. So I'm damn proud of those people.
I saw pictures of the Yellow Vests hanging out windows.
Okay. Yes, about the French. They also showed up in great support for Assange. And then also in Germany, too, we've seen this sort of legislation being put forward, or these regulations being put forward, where they, too, cannot be in groups of more than 2 people. So I think we're just going to see this spread throughout Europe and throughout the world. I do want to thank Beth B right now for the super chat. Thank you so much, Beth. She's been watching the vigils since we started, going on almost a year now. So thank you, Beth. And thank you, everybody who watched this evening. I think we're ready to close out here with our final statements. I just want to say thank you to everybody who watched. Thank you for great support.
Beth was part of the DC crew. She's awesome. We got to meet Beth and hang out with her for a week.
That's great. It's always wonderful to meet our supporters and those who've been with us in this fight the entire time. So again, thank you, Beth. Now, I do want to just say that thank you, everybody, for watching. Of course, you know, I think things are just going to continue to be more difficult moving forward. Andrew and I are both in Ohio, and as of like this evening, in about an hour, we're going to be on a lockdown as well. Steve is in California. He's been on a lockdown or a shelter in place for quite some time now. Same with our tech as well. So we will be doing more live streams, more video footage coming to you guys, since more and more of you will be at home. And again, thank you, Andrew and Steve, for joining me on this vigil this evening. And thank you, everybody watching. Again, you can follow me on Twitter @_Taylor Hudak, and then also on Instagram @journalist_Taylor.
Yeah, I just want to play one last little video for everyone. And first I'll say you can find me on Twitter @Andrew Zigman. You can find us @action_4 Assange. But this little video is something that warms my heart up every time I play it. And this was Chelsea Manning's campaign ad from 2018. Not enough people got to see. At some point I'll stop playing it, but at this point I still love it. So Aw, what? Where's the audio coming from then? I'm so sad. Well, we'll skip it for this time and we'll figure it out later. Sorry.
All right, y'all. Well,
I tried.
thank you for hanging out with us tonight. We really do love you guys. You've just been an incredible audience. Much love to all the people in my chat right now, and in the A4A chat and on various other platforms. We're big thanks to Jason Carney and people of the 99% for streaming this on Facebook. All of the thank yous to Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos. Thanks to Beth and to Rob Juno for the super chats. My name is Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day that you can find here on the YouTubes if you type in Slow News Day podcast into the search bar. I go out of my way to use independent media for the baseline material for my content. I do not talk about the goddamn horse race unless it applies to something bigger. You can find me on Twitter at Slow News Day Show. And yeah, thanks again, everyone. We love you very much. We will see you Wednesday, if not sooner. Wednesday, we will be joined again by Krish Mohan, and for the first time on a Free Assange Vigil, Vivian Kubrick. Really looking forward to that. So until next time, y'all, good luck to us all.